Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto become Anbu commander before Itachi Uchiha? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Thedeming King Naruto for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Screams. Blood. Slaughter. Death. Everywhere you looked you could see bodies of badly burned shinobi and kunoichi alike. Their bodies were not even able to be identified. For what surrounded them were buildings that were crumbling from what looked like to be crushed or burned by the massive flames surrounding the area. What was happening? Well, it was simple. The once great place known as Konohagakure, strongest shinobi village of the 5 great shinobi villages, was being attacked by a massive looking fox with 9 gigantic flaming tails. The fox was in legend named the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Some say it never appears in human affairs. Aside the fight between Harashima Senju and Madara Uchiha, since it was summoned by the Uchiha clan founder. But the question was why? Why had the fox attacked this once great shinobi village? That was on the mind of a few people. Well, there were more important things going on. In which case was a fight happening on the front line. 4 figures could be seen. First was a man that stood the height of 5'8". He wore the normal shinobi attire, which consisted of a dark blue long-sleeved shirt with a green jounin flak jacket. He also wore dark blue jounin pants that had medical tapped at the ends. Ending his attire was blue shinobi sandals and a sleeveless white trench coat with red flames licking the bottoms and a small chain connecting the ends together. The man had tanned skin with icy sharp blue eyes with spiky yellow hair. This man's name was Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage of Konohagakure, husband to Kushina Uzumaki and father to his 5-year-old son Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and his newborn daughter Mito Uzumaki Namikaze, named after Kushina's great-grandmother. At the moment he was fighting a man standing the same height. Not much could be said about this man, except for a few things. First was that all that could be seen was that he wore black shinobi sandals and black shinobi pants. Beyond this was just a black cloak that covered everything on the upper body. He also adorned a mask with a design on the left side, but what was unusual was that there was only one eye hole in it, which was on the man's right side of his face. These two were fighting while the other two were watching with mixed emotions. The first was a beautiful woman with long silky red hair that at the moment reached the ground. She had a heart-shaped face and violet eyes that showed how tired she looked. She was at the moment wearing a hospital gown and was holding a covered-up bundle in her arms. The only thing you could see was a tuft of red hair. This woman was Kushina Uzumaki, 2nd Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, wife of Minato Namikaze and mother of Naruto and Mito Uzumaki Namikaze. She was holding her newborn daughter tightly at her chest as she watched her husband fight off the man that ruined everything for them. The one who destroyed the day her daughter was coming into this world. She looked worryingly at the person beside her. This person she was looking at now was a boy that looked around the age of 5 years old. He was wearing an attire not seen on any other kid their age. He was wearing an attire of a shinobi. His clothes were special made since this boy had become a shinobi at a young age, but it all was what a normal anbu would wear, only not with a mask. His face was what it concerned. This boy had blue eyes that were round like hers, but were already starting to narrow like Minato's, and had spiky yellow hair like Minato, but it was much more spiky than Minato's even when he was younger. This boy was none other than her and Minato's pride and joy and genius of a shinobi. He was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, genin of Konohagakure, son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, and now brother of Mito Uzumaki Namikaze. He had a kunai and shuriken pouch on his left thigh. Right now Kushina was getting worried for her son, who was glaring at the cloaked figure with much hate that surprised her, since she hadn't seen such hate from her son at all, except when it came to some of the higher-up people in Konoha. Although I don't blame him, Ing Council been trying to turn him into a weapon since he was born. Kami only knows what they would do when they find out Mito was born. She thought bitterly before she looked back at the fight and saw Minato Rasengan the cloaked figure into the ground using his Hiraishin no Jutsu level 2. That was before Minato jumped back to them as the man disappeared a few feet from them holding his injured arm. The man himself was glaring at Minato's form with hate and rage. This spiky-haired fool stopped his plans fully, but still Kyuubi could still destroy Konoha. So with it he just turned his head toward Kushina's form and saw the little bundle in her arms. He smiled evilly behind his mask and warped behind her, and before Minato could do anything the cloaked figure took out a kunai and brought it down to the bundle in Kushina's arms. Minato watched in horrified eyes as he used Hiraishin to get there in time, while Kushina was too weak after having Kyuubi ripped out of her by this man. But with surprising speed the kunai was stopped by another, which shocked the masked man before he looked into another pair of blue eyes, but they held so much more coldness and hate that it made the man inwardly slightly flinch. Naruto kept his gaze on the man, not seeing the shocked look of his parents before jumping up, kicking the man in the face, send the man skidding back a few feet. This gave Minato the time to appear between his family and the cloaked figure, who now had a bit of a crack in his mask. The man now was shocked he was actually kicked, or more so was hit. He was now glaring at the other blonde boy in hate and now wonder. He mentally shook his head before speaking. HMPH, I don't need to be here anymore, my job here is done, said before warping out of the area. With the man now gone, Minato stretched out his senses to look for the man and sighed in relief, not finding the man not there. He looked over his shoulder and smiled at his family before he heard Kushina start to cough violently. He rushed over to her as Naruto was by her side in an instant and was doing as much as he could to help her. He was looking worried as his mother was coughing up blood while protectingly holding Mito in her arms. He gently held her upright as Minato rushed over and was checking her and saw the effects of having Kyuubi ripped out of her taking its toll. He then remembered the threat that was looming over Konoha and looked at the now growling Kyuubi who had turned its sights on them. He glared as his mind was going a mile a minute to think of an idea to stop the Kyuubi before he remembered a type of sealing that he had created with the help of Kushina's own mastery in sealing. He grimly remembered the effects of what it does to the user, but remembered the pros of what it does. Naruto, who was holding his little sister in his arms and helping his mother to support her weakened state. He looked and saw the emotions running through his two Sans eyes as he was staring at the Kyuubi who was coming at them. Kushina must have seen this before chakra chains came out of the ground holding the Kyuubi, slamming it down in front of them. This action made Minato and Naruto snap their heads to her in worry, seeing her get weaker as she looked into Kyuubi's crazed eyes and saw something wrong with it but couldn't figure it out in her state of weakness. Minato sighed before he heard a rush of wind and saw a giant paw heading for Kushina and cursed before flashing in a flash of yellow. He hoped he would make it in time. Naruto saw the coming paw and knew where it was going. He looked at his little Amato in his arms before kissing her forehead before putting her in Kushina's arms and jumping in the way with his back at the incoming paw. Kushina looked with horrified eyes as Naruto just threw himself in harm's way to stop the incoming attack from killing her. She saw Minato appear too late and saw him watch with horrified eyes as his son just sacrificed himself for his mother. He started to tear up seeing what was happening, but that was squashed down when his son weakly looked at him as blood was dripping from his mouth. Naruto at the moment was in so much pain he couldn't think straight except for just protecting his mother. He looked over his shoulder and glared at the less crazed eyes of Kyuubi before looking at his father that was tearing him at what had happened. He smiled at his father as more blood dripped from him. "Dusando, it will you have the chances," said as the light in his eyes was going out. Minato frowned before he saw Naruto's understanding his eyes. His eyes were growing wide as Kushina was crying on what was happening. She still listened on what Naruto was saying. "Esachu water, you he said. "Dusanusa Thessalingan muse the shiki fuin in me while you have the chances," said in a much weaker voice. Kushina shot her head up in disbelief at what her son just said, while Minato just looked into his son's eyes, seeing his son completely serious of what he was saying. Kushina voiced her concern. "Esachui," she said, which Naruto looked at her before smiling, ignoring the blood running down his chin. "Why? It's simple, I wanted to protect you. Kasan as for the sealing is cough, I'm sure you know I'm actually now connected to Kyuubiso. Now the shiki fuin would do its work and cough drag this fox into mess said. But how do I you know that sealing?" said Minato as his along with Kushina's eyes were watering. Naruto just smiled because I've studied the effects from the vault. Well, you weren't. Lakingi was curious and knew this was the only sealing I knew would stop Kyuubi, and I know for a fact it if the container was physically connected to the Onabang so let this will greatly increase the chances of the sealing be done perfectly. He said before going into a coughing fit. Minato and Kushina were now letting the tears fall. They knew of that sealing, it was the same one Kushina helped Minato with. They both knew of the effects and what it does. The sealing would summon the god of death itself, Shinigami, to carry on the sealing, and even though the Shinigami has immense power, it would have trouble sealing one like Kyuubi. That's when they realized Naruto's plan and had to smile even though their son was dying in front of them while they couldn't do anything about it. Naruto showed smarts, they went beyond his age. Minato let a tear fall before looking at Kushina as she didn't hold anything back as she sobbed into Naruto's shoulder. He knew if he went through with the sealing he would most definitely die, and the way Kushina was she would too from the lack of Kyuubi. Even with the Uzumaki's long activity she wouldn't come out of this alive. And finally his son Naruto, his flesh and blood, he didn't know if he would survive since the Shinigami would seal it up in the container and drag the container into its realm with himself included, or would heal Naruto. But either way, if they three died, who would look after Mito? He wasn't stupid to leave her in Konoha's hands, but he did trust Jiraiya if things got bad, and Tsunade was there too. He didn't believe in Sarutobi much, even if he did call the man sensei. He just couldn't place that there was something underneath that old man that was dangerous. He sighed before he smiled at his son and wife before walking up to Kushina and bringing her into a hug. He looked down at Mito with eternal sadness in his eyes before looking at Naruto with so much respect for his son. Fushi-chan, let's do it, said which she looked at him with a weak defiant look before a cough interrupted her thoughts. She looked and saw Naruto looking at with pleading eyes which broke her iron will that she was known for before she nodded as well. Knowing this was the only way. Naruto smiled before he looked at his father. Do-san, do it, no, he said with a struggle as he coughed up more blood. Minato nodded quickly as he did the hand signs. As he did so, Naruto looked at Kushina one more time. Ka-san, let me see Heron more time, he said, gesturing to Mito. Kushina smiled sadly as she weakly shifted Mito in her arms to uncover a sleeping red-eyed baby girl. Naruto smiled at her, and even though he had lost all strength in his whole body, he moved his bloody right hand and gently touched her sleeping face. His eyes were looking at her face solely, even as his father was getting to the last signs, or the fact Sarutobi arrived with Kakashi and Jiraiya, or the fact his mother was watching with sad tears coming down her face. I don't know if you can hear me, but I will say this, Ani-san doesn't have long and he wants to say Hispasa said as the baby girl's eyes started to twitch. As Naruto was doing this, he didn't see the once upon a time Kyuubi crazed eyes glaring down on him go glaze before it blinked before looking upon the situation, before its eyes shot wide open seeing Kushina's state. That's also when it felt something on its left claw. It looked down to see Naruto's bloody body struck through its claw. Its eyes shot wide open even more as an emotion flickered in its eyes. If anyone would have seen it, they would have seen a teardrop from the Kyuubi's eye. Naruto looked and saw Mito's eyes starting to slowly open. He was shocked while internally was happy to see her eyes before he died. He knew he would die, he wasn't stupid, and it made him sad he wouldn't be able to watch her grow. He cut out his musings to see violet innocent eyes staring at him curiously. He smiled sadly as he stroked her small cheek which got a small giggle from the now awake little girl. He smirked even as he was on death's door. He would smile at his baby sister since she was taking her first look into the world and was kinda glad he was the first thing she saw. He continued not seeing the shocked and yet terribly sad eyes of Jiraiya, Kakashi and Sarutobi. Amada Alchemedo, the world, this probably isn't the right thing for you to see on your first look, but at least you can see Ani-san first, isn't that right, he said, cooing the last part which got a small giggle from the little babe. Kushina watched with sad eyes at her son talk to his baby sister, which to her was his last her words to her. Minato was on the last hand sign before hesitating and looking at Naruto, only to get his side he would remember forever in death. Naruto was smiling at Mito while holding her small hand in his own. He saw him talking to Mito, which the little one was giggling and smiling at her Ani-san. That's when he saw the sideway glance from Naruto which was so full of determination it shocked him before nodding. Naruto then looked back at Mito and said his last words to her. But I'm afraid Ani-san is going away now and big brother won't be able to see you grow up into a beautiful woman. He knows you will. I won't be able to protect you at night like a big brother should. I'm sorry I won't be able to help you when you really need it. But know Thaisi will always be watching over you somewhere. You should know I will always be there even when you don't know it, said with a strong voice, even as he was going very pale. He may be 5 years old, but he was much more mature for his age and knew this was probably be the last time he would see her. Despite the short years he trained ever since he could walk, his mind would unexpectedly grow beyond his physical appearance. He only told this to his Ka-san and Tu-san and his best friend Itachi. God, he's gonna miss him. Even though Itachi was the same age as him, Itachi was like a little brother to him, always asking for help with his shinobi duties. He just mentally hoped Itachi could get over his death. He looked at Mito, who was looking at him even more now with tears starting to form in her innocent eyes. It was like she could understand what was happening instinctively and started to cry. He smiled sadly before kissing the crying baby on the forehead once more before looking at a sad Kushina. Ah, Sango Ahia, take her to San is finished, said, which she nodded before taking the little girl in her arms once more to lullaby her to help calm her down. Naruto looked back to see the shocked spectators and smiled. See you later Kakashiro Senin Hokage-sama said before Minato shakingly slammed his hands on the ground with his bangs covering the tears falling from his face. Shiki Fuin. Naruto smiled sadly as a flash of erupted around the family of Namikas and the deathly silent Kyuubi, while the barrier separated them between the now coming shinobi from Konoha to see what the Yadaime had planned. Silence. That was what greeted Naruto as he had his eyes closed. That's when he felt something. He doesn't feel pain anymore. He twitched his eyes a bit before opening them to see darkness. He couldn't see anything except the outlining of a ghostly apparition in the darkness in front of him. He couldn't tell what it was, but he did have a suspicion of what it was. The ghostly apparition itself was staring at Naruto's suspend form in the darkness with interest. He knew of the boy, but for some reason something about the boy just interested it to no end. And most mortal don't have the ability to interest a being such as itself. It decided to show itself to the boy after dealing with the ceiling. Back in the dome of light you could see the still figures of the Namikaze family and Kyuubi with Mito silent as well. That's when they all felt it. Death. An embodiment of death itself slammed on them all except Mito as to not kill the little babe. The ghostly apparition showed itself to be a white-cloaked purple-skinned deity. The appearance of the thing showed its spiky white hair that sticked in all directions as it flowed past its neck. There was also horn sticks out of its head and hair. It looked at them all with calculating yellow piercing eyes that showed wisdom beyond comprehension. It looked before it settled on Kyuubi. It frowned before looking at Minato and Kushina. That's when it linked all the dots. It looked down at Minato's haggard form, who was staring at him with sadness that showed even a mortal could make a god flinch from the sadness in his eyes. He followed his gaze discreetly at Naruto's prone form, with his stomach impaled by Kyuubi's claw. The deity frowned before looking upon the forms of Minato and Kushina looking at it. It then started to speak. "Mortal, we have you summoned," it said. Even though it knew why, it still needed to know everything perfectly. Minato not looking at Naruto prone form, for he was sure it would break him up inside. State Shinigami Samaplase Begyakin, you seal the Kyuubi Awe into, my son, he said as tears started to form in his eyes. Shinigami even itself softened its own eyes and stated. Mortali can't do such a thing, Javentho, your son's chakra coils haven't fully developed yet, it would certainly kill him. Even now your son is stuck in limbo since I haven't passed judgment on the boy yet. Though we can seal it into your other child, it said gazing at the other child. This got shocked and sad reactions from the two, and even Kyuubi was shocked to hear what the Shinigami said. Naruto? In limbo? They looked at Naruto's prone body, and Kushina burst into tears, seeing his eyes dull of any life in them. Minato started shaking as he dropped to his knees with his head hung low. Kyuubi looked at Naruto's prone body in sadness. It had watched from within Kushina how Naruto grew up and had come to respect him, and now it being the one causing Naruto to die just made it want to die. Shinigami just watched on with an impassive face, not showing the hint of pity in its eyes for the mortals. Minato stopped shaking before looking into Shinigami's own eyes, showing a broken man. Yes, but please say, beg you Shinigami, let us talk to Mito before we join our son, that's all I ask of you, Shinigami-sama said, kneeling before the being with his head on the ground. Shinigami on the outside just looked at the man while on the inside just smiled. It nodded, making Minato smile in happiness, thinking after this he could go see his son on the other side. He walked over to Kushina as they sat in front of Naruto with him facing them. Even if he couldn't actually see them, he will remember the memory of what the family together one last time. The two talked to each other as Minato told Kushina of his plan of sealing part of their chakra in the seal so they could help Mito when she grew up. Kushina agreed to this before she said her last words to Mito, as did Minato. Though they were surprised when Kyuubi itself started to slowly wrap its tails around them, all bringing them closer to each in Naruto prone form. Kushina looked into Kyuubi's eyes to see sadness beyond recognition. She smiled sadly, knowing Kyuubi was back to its true mental stability. They gathered closer to Naruto's body, which instinctively moved a bit, secretly shocking the Shinigami, knowing the boy was still in limbo, so how was his body still moving? They watched as he raised his head to look at them, and even though his eyes were dull of life, he smiled a gentle smile that radiated happiness, never seen before. It shined like a sun. Kushina and Minato got up with Mito in Kushina's arms, walked closer to him as Kyuubi's tails closed in around them, and hugged his body, which he did his best, and wrapped his little arms around them as his face was staring straight into Mito's own. This was the image Shinigami saw, and right now the deity had come over its shock and was smiling at the picture. Even now it could feel Naruto in limbo, smiling as if he was feeling what his body was doing. It then glanced at Kyuubi, who at the moment was tearing up as the tears fell into its fur. It frowned once more. That monster Madara had did this and would be damned if it didn't hunt him down for this. It then saw the family separate just a little before they turned towards Shinigami with determined eyes, knowing they were ready. It inwardly saddened it to let this happen, but even it didn't have the power to break the rules her sister created when this seal was made. That's when she started the sealing. And small author's note: Shinigami, just like Kami, will be portrayed as females in my story. Naruto, who was still in the dark realm as he called it, was sitting on the floor meditating, trying to remember the feeling he just got a few minutes ago. That's when he saw his family around him smiling at him and the Kyuubis tailed around them protectively. He let a small teardrop from his face, knowing he wouldn't see them again. And like someone was reading his mind, "Oh, I don't know about that," said a feminine voice behind him. Naruto quickly jumped back in a defensive position only to see a ghostly figure a few feet away from him, and it showed the deity Shinigami with an amused look in its eyes. Naruto just stared at the Shinigami before relaxing just a slight bit to analyze the situation and remembering who it was just glared into the eyes of Shinigami, shocking her inwardly since this mortal was only 5 years old but showed he wasn't afraid of her in this form. Naruto just glared at the specter and god of death before he spoke. "I see you're here to take me into your stomach as well. Then go ahead and take me and Kyuubi," he said, which the Shinigami smiled before it spoke. "First off, you have quite the courage to stand up to me, the goddess of death, like that. And second, let me talk in a better form, this one is just for Shosage Shinigami, shocking Naruto before she glowed white before her form started to shrink till it was as tall as Naruto so she could look into Naruto's eyes. When the light dissipated, it showed the body of a 5-year-old girl with straight pitch black hair and porcelain skin that shone beautiful in limbo. Her eyes were that of the purest white. She was wearing a black kimono. She had no footwear. From what he could see, that was before he saw her smirking at him. Since he did admittingly look over her body, he looked away from her face, a tint of pink on his face. This action only amused the girl before him even more, since he heard a heavenly chuckle from her, which made his heart warm a little. It sounded so much like a melody his Kasan would sing to him when he was little. He regained himself and looked back at her, only to see himself inches from the girl's face. He blushed before taking a step back. This only made her smile as she spoke. "You know up close you're kinda cute. She said, admitting the honest truth. He was only 5 years old, but in the academy he was one of the most wanted boys in the academy. He was growing up fast since his face was getting more angular from all the training he did. He recomposed himself and stared at her with curious eyes. You weren't you Shinigami? I mean seriously, Toussaint finished the ceiling, shouldn't I be with him in Yaoi? Don't know, pointing to his stomach, which got a laugh from her. Kami. Her laugh itself was like a melody. Shinigami shook her head before looking at Naruto. The boy just interested her greatly, even now knowing she was the Shinigami goddess over death, and he seemed to totally unfazed by this. It made her interest him go up higher each time he spoke. But then she remembered the situation at hand and frowned. Naruto said in a stern voice which shook the boy and made him realize she was now serious, so his eyes hardened since he knew there was a time to goof off and a time to be serious when the situation called for it. This action made Shinigami even more interested in Naruto now. She couldn't wait to tell Kami-chan about this one. She cleared her throat before speaking. Naruto, I know everything that has happened since Kyuubi attacked Konoha, and I have to say, watching you sacrifice your life for your mother like that even at your age is surprising. Most children would have stayed rooted in the spot, yet you threw yourself in harm's way to save someone precious to you. That is a very admirable thing to do, Naruto. She said with warmth in her voice. Naruto just looked down, smiling sadly, figuring it was his last act of ever seeing his family again. Shinigami saw this and continued, unfortunately things went bad. Your plan, from what I can see, Bakfiridu died before the ceiling could complete itself. And we had to choose another container, and the only one at the time that could Kyuubi was none other, Thatch said, and that's when she stopped seeing the recognition in Naruto's eyes. Naruto's eyes were wide in terror, figuring his plan would have succeeded, but hearing what happened made him hate himself. He wasn't strong enough to last a bit longer. He thought about what he could do before he snapped his eyes open and raised his head to stare Shinigami in the eye. This action made her flick in his eyes, showed determination beyond anything she had ever seen. Not one mortal ever had those eyes before, not in history. No one came close to these eyes. These eyes both scared her and intrigued her for some reason. First, she was scared for those that fought against him when his eyes were like that, and two, it excited her to see a mortal make her a goddess flinch. Oh yes, she was now fascinated with this one. She then continued, despite Naruto's growing aura that glowed a light blue color. Also, I hate to inform you, Butte, your father and Mother weren't able to survive the ceiling, since you know of the price of summoning me to your realm. And your mother, the wound she suffered and the terrible pain of having Kyuubi ripped out of her, made her go over the edge. I was able to stop time and the barrier which separated all of them and Kyuubi from the outside world. She said, but was cut off when she felt it. Naruto's aura started rising after each word was spoken, and when she said his parents were dead, his aura skyrocketed, startling Shinigami. Her eyes were wide open in shock. She now saw Naruto glowing figure shrouded by the waves upon waves of the blue spiritual energy. She then hesitantly looked and saw his D's. They now glowed with an unearthly white outlining the pupil. Naruto couldn't believe it, but hearing it from the goddess herself made Naruto snap. His little sister. She would be all alone in the cursed shinobi world. The world he knew that had too much violence and greedy humans. The world he knew would hurt her. That's when he made a decision that would change the shinobi world forever and make the heavens and hell itself shift. He glared at the shocked goddess of death. Fake Mebik said, with an unearthly wind blew through him and past Shinigami, ruffling her hair and kimono. But this didn't phase. What did was that his Ryatsu was growing much larger than any mortal should. Even for a Hokage, this was too much. She heard his words and was about to disagree when she stopped seeing his eyes and saw he wouldn't take a no for an answer, and somehow in the deepest reaches of her body, she felt that she needed to say yes. That's when something hit her. His Ryatsu was beyond that of any mortal she had ever seen. He had courage and the guts to go up against anyone despite it being human, demon or god. He wouldn't stop. And the last thing she took in personally was that he would protect his precious people till his dying breath, and then some. That's when she decided on what she wanted to do and knew she would get a tongue lashing from her sister, but even Kami would agree when she sees Naruto later on. Shinigami looks into Naruto's bright blue glowing eyes, hiding her anxiety from seeing such eyes, and spoke. Then if that is what you want, then I need to ask, said with an edge at the end of her voice. She glared back into his eyes. Are you willing to sacrifice your humanity to gain your life back? If you choose to do so, then you will be brought back, but with the knowledge of you being my avatar in the living world. Would you do this, she said with a serious tone in her voice. This was a decision she actually wanted him to accept. For some reason, imagining him being her avatar sent chills down her spine. Naruto was inwardly shocked at her deal and thought about sacrificing his humanity to come back to life. Being her avatar in the living world. That meant he would have the powers of a Shinigami. He then remembered his baby sister's face and decided with no hesitation, hell yes. I would do anything to protect what family I have left, be damned if I'm a human or whatever the hell I am. I will still protect my precious people, and nothing will stand in my way of that, he said with his Reiatsu flaring even higher at that point. Shinigami smiled at this before appearing in front of Naruto, surprising him before she caressed his face with both hands. Then received the kiss of the Shinigami, said, and before he could interrupt she captured his lips with her own. This made sparks run down Naruto's spine since this was his first kiss, and despite his age, he was always curious about his first time. So with a little hesitation he kissed back, earning a small moan of surprise from the goddess. He instinctively wrapped his arms around her small frame and leaned in a bit more. This went on a bit more before Naruto's body flashed white. When it dissipated, it showed Naruto wearing a different attire. He now wore a white shitage underneath a black kozode. Below this he wore a white hakama himo underneath a black hakama. The last thing was that he wore a white sash around his waist and on his feet, replacing his once upon a time shinobi sandals were white tabi as his footwear were waraji. Finishing off the look was a giant sword on his back that just oozed Reiatsu. At the moment the goddess of death was still getting out of her little daze until Naruto flashed, and that's when she opened her eyes to see Naruto's transformation. And to say she was shocked was an understatement. Never before did she think Naruto would become something like this. For she was seeing a ghostly image of a mask on his face. She shook herself as she looked at her now avatar to the real world, and she honestly couldn't be happier of who she had chosen. Naruto blinked before looking at himself and saw his different attire before shrugging. It wasn't important at the moment. He looked back up to see the goddess looking at his form in shock before recompassing herself. Well, now that you have become my avatar, there are some things you need to know, though I'm pretty sure you'll get to know most of what you are later on. All I have to say is that you truly only answer to me and no one else, even your Hokage. No one is your true leader except for myself. And when I call for you, it is either that I need a soul taken when I am too busy to do so. Also, there will be times when I have to call upon you to get rid of people tampering in Kami or my territories. Do you understand, she said, which Naruto nodded, already having knowledge of what he is going through his mind. She smiled before bringing him into a hug. This shocked him before he embracing the warmth. Now it's time for you to go, but before you do, me name isn't Shinigami, it's Itulish, said hesitantly, for no mortal knew her name, and this would be the first one to ever know, besides Kami. Naruto looked at her curiously until she looked back at him and said, my name is Megumi, shuddered. He just blinked before smiling. That's a wonderful name, Megumi has a nice ring to it, said before he remembered the happenings in the living world and all sense of playfulness erased from his body. Megumi blushed at his compliment before seeing the change in his demeanor. Naruto had to go back to the living world fast. I guess it's time for you to go for now. But remember, the abolites of being my avatar will come to you in time, I promise, but for now you have to go back, she said with a hint of sadness in her voice. Naruto just stiffly nodded, and with that Megami snapped her finger and a flash of light erupted from the darkness. As he closed in on them, Naruto smiled at Megami, surprising her a bit. Megami-sama, will you do me a favor and tell my parents Amato-chan will be protected, he said, which she smiled before nodding, and with that the light covered them both. As it did so, Naruto swore he heard a faint voice from Megami saying, goodbye for Nomi avatar, soon will we see each other again, and honestly, I can't wait for that to happen. He smiled before he accepted the light, bringing him back to his world. So this way he can still protect what family he has left in the world. In the living world outside the barrier was half the Anbu, the Hokage, with Kakashi and Jiraiya. They had all watched as Minato do some kind of seal before this barrier had erupted. Some had tried to destroy it using every jutsu they knew. But nothing had worked, so they decided to wait for it to finish, though they were very worried for Naruto when they saw him impaled on Kyuubi's claw before they vanished in the light. That's when they heard a crack and they looked up to see a barrier cracking before more cracks appeared, before shattering, and a blinding white light erupting from inside, blinding them all from what could be seen. When it died down, they had looked up to see a sight that would forever be in everyone's mind that day. Naruto was there dressed in his normal attire, holding on to his baby sister as he sat between his parents who were holding on to each other smiling. Naruto was standing between their bodies with his sister held tightly against himself, with his head held down, his bangs covering his eyes. When he looked up he looked at the now shocked spectators, his once blue eyes were now glowing with a supernatural blue that some took a step back. While some who were friends with Naruto, namely some of the Anbu and Kakashi and Jiraiya, were gobsmacked and were wondering what happened. Sarutobi though was the first one to get over his shock first before taking the situation at hand and saw how his predecessor was dead along with his wife, leaving behind their now alive son and newborn daughter. He looked at Naruto, and from the time he seen the kid graduate at the age that was unnatural from the little time he was on his team, never once had he seen his eyes like they were. He was honest with himself, those eyes scared him for some reason. Naruto looked down at his parents' bodies and smiled sadly before looking his baby sister and smiling warmly at her sleeping face. He looked at the ceiling on her belly glowing red and mentally nodded. He saw the only influence from the ceiling was the whisker marks on her face. He bent his head just a little bit, kissing her forehead once more, and whispered his words that somehow echoed around the area. "Don't worry, Amato-chan, Ani-san is here for you, and he's gonna protect you from anyone and anything, even if he has to face the devil," Itself whispered, which somehow got a small smile from the red-headed babe. He looked down at his parents' bodies and took out 2 storage scrolls. He was gonna have them buried where they wanted. He wasn't about to let the council or even Sarutobi decide this, only him. He sealed them into the scrolls and pocketed them into a pouch. He looked back at the spectators and walked over to them. As he did so he ignored the astonished looks he was getting or the suspicious glares aimed at his sister. When one did he would glare back, making them freeze in their tracks. He walked right up to Sarutobi and looked him right in the eye. "Okajama, I'm sure you already know what's happened, as do you, Jiraiya-san, but right now I don't care what you do, cause right now I have a little sister to take care of," Dottie said, and before they could stop him, he jumped back into the woods heading for the Namikaze compound. He knew what he just did would be called into question, and there was also gonna be a council meeting for what happened and him being called in. Well, he didn't care at the moment. What he did care about was protecting his baby sister. He knew for a 5-year-old taking care of a child would be hard, but he wouldn't give in. He wouldn't let others take care of her, since he didn't trust most, except for a select few. Hell, he didn't trust Kakashi or Jiraiya. They might be family friends, it was just something about them told him not to trust them completely. And Sarutobi didn't trust that man at all. He knew he would take after the village more than the Hokage's family and would try to announce something to the public to quell down their questions. If it did come to that. Hell hath no fury like a brother's wrath, for not even Kami would stop him from unleashing his rage upon those that would try to hurt his sister. When Naruto reached the compound he entered in before activating the security seals around the compound and area to not let anyone in. He then went to his now sister's room that was beside his own and saw everything in order, from the little crib with plush toys to oddly enough an orange-colored fox as well. Then the diapers to the blankets. He remembered his costs and buying food for when she was hungry and storing them in the kitchen. He looked at his sister, seeing her sleeping he smiled before sitting in the rocking chair and laying Mito on his chest, letting her sleep. He then covered them up with a blanket and he started letting himself fall asleep. He would be doing this a lot to be sure she was safe. Bagami, who was watching through the mirror, looked at her side and saw the parents of the two smiling warmly at the scene. She smiled as well before she started to explain why they were here. But that, the legacy of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, Mito Uzumaki Namikaze and the avatar of the goddess of death, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, began. Next day we find Naruto waking up to look down, seeing a little snoring babe. He smiled before picking her up and going down to the kitchen to get her something to eat. That's when he heard knocking. He heard it coming from the front door, and as he walked over to it, he discreetly pulled out a kunai to make sure it wasn't an enemy. He opened the door to see his panting long-time friend Itachi Uchiha. He smiled. This was probably the only person he truly trusted in Konoha, though he frowned when he saw the worried look on his friend's face. Itachi, who was panting to get here as fast as he could, looked up to see his best friend looking at him with curiosity and confusion. He needed to hurry before the personal anbu of the Hokage came. That's when he saw the bundle in his arms and he remembered his mother saying something about Kushina having another child. He smiled despite the situation coming at hand. He shook his head before looking at Naruto again. "Naruto Nai-san. Hurry, you need to get to the council chambers. They have ordered the Hokage's personal guard to come get you. I got here as fast as I could before them," he said, which Naruto frowned at before looking at his sister. Then he looked at Itachi with the same eyes he had the night before. This froze Itachi in place. His surrogate brother was staring at him with eyes he had never seen before. They looked like they were the eyes of a warrior shaman who would travel through the 9 levels of hell and back to protect his precious people. Naruto saw Itachi's look, but ignored it for more important matters. "I knew this would happen. Itachi, do me a favor, hold Mito and stay in this house till I come back. I personally don't trust anyone except you with her, so please keep her safe inside the house." "Okay," he said, holding Mito to Itachi. Said Uchiha hesitated before holding on to Mito. He looked down and immediately smiled seeing her sleeping face. As for myself, I'm going to have a talk with the council, and also Itachi, if she gets hungry, the food is in the kitchen in the pantry. I'll be back alright, he said, which Itachi nodded at since he knew from experience taking care of his little brother Sasuke. Naruto smiled before jumping through the forest to get this meeting over with. That's when he met up with the Anbu guards, the personal guardians of the Hokage. He frowned before he saw the leader coming up to him. Naruto-san, you have been requested at the council chambers by the Hokage to discuss of what happened during the Kyuubi attack last night, he said. Naruto nodded before heading his way with the Anbu following him. When they were passing through Konoha, he saw the destruction Kyuubi had left in its wake and the people who were rebuilding. When some saw him, they were whispering to each other before getting back to work. Naruto just ignored them. He didn't really care of what they had to say. He honestly didn't care for Konoha in general, only the people that were his friends. That's when they stopped at the Hokage Tower. Once inside, they lead him to the chambers. He could actually feel the feeling of nervousness coming from a few people that were staring at him as they walked to the doors. He frowned. It was like he was walking to his execution. Once at the doors, he was getting irritated, and before the Anbu could open the door, he did it himself. The way his Kasan used to. Picking them open, making a bang echo around the chambers, silencing the arguing that was happening. The whole council and Hokage included looked to see Naruto with a twitching eyebrow, with a nervous Anbu squad behind them. What is it you have called me here? For said with an edge to his voice, which made a few raise an eyebrow at. Sarutobi quickly cleared his throat before someone took offense to what Naruto just said. He looked at Naruto, nothing Naruto-kun, only to find out what happened at the Kyuubi attack, and I'd suggest you don't lie. We need to know the truth, he said. This made Naruto physically scowl, remembering the event. He then mentally decided to do this only to get the council off his back on the topic. He explained everything except of his abusiveness with the goddess of death. How she was used at the container of the ceiling of Kyuubi. This got many scowls from the civilian side. He ended it there when he took Mito away from the area so Sarutobi could clean up the area. After his explanation, the civilian side erupted. We have to kill the demon while it's weak. The seal is sure to break soon. We have the chance to end Kyuubi now. The Kyuubi is weakened. We have the chance to end it once and for all, screeched a pink-haired woman. Naruto was trembling with anger as the few clan heads that were friends with Minato and Kushina knew of their skills in sealing and knew that there was no way of that seal breaking. Uchiha Fugaku though was frowning as he looked at Naruto. The boy himself was best friends with his genius son Itachi and knew that there was something he wasn't gonna tell them. Sarutobi schooled his features as the civilians kept complaining, but that stopped when he saw Naruto trembling. His eyes widened when he saw a little glance in his eye. The shinobi council that was Sarutobi's old teammates Kaharu, Hamura and Shimura Danzo were neutral on what to think actually, as they had glances at each other. Naruto had enough of the death threats and spite against his sister, so he raised his head, snapped his eyes open, which changed from the sapphire blue they were to the white of his eyes being pure black and the pupil being a golden yellow, and practically roared. If you mothers don't shut your mouth this instant, so help Kami, I won't stop myself from killing every single piece of shit civilian in here. Do you understand me? He yelled as his chakra actually exploded around him, making a crater where he stood while the windows shattered as well. The walls and ceiling as well started to creak and crack from his unleashed chakra. The civilians practically fell down gasping for breath while the clan heads were looking at Naruto in shock. Well, Tsume was sporting a devilish grin. Yep, Naruto was definitely Kushina and Minato's son. Sarutobi was staring at Naruto in utter shock. To threaten the civilians like that he hasn't seen except from Kushina or Minato when they were pissed, and from the brief glance he saw in Naruto's eyes, he knew it would happen again if they crossed the line with him. The Anbu that were close to Naruto were blowed back a few feet as well. When the chakra pressure had cooled down a bit, Naruto snapped open, his eyes glaring at the civilians, making them go pale. If I ever hear you say that again, I hold my promise and kill you without a shred of remorse. That goes for every single person in here, he said, pointing to everyone. Mito Uzumaki Namikaze is my baby sister, and despite me only being 5 years old, I will fight to the death to protect her from the enemies outside of Konoha, and the ones on the inside, that includes those that would try to hurt her physically or mentally. They will die by my hand. And you Hokage-sama won't stop me either, he said, making Sarutobi go wide-eyed as well as the rest of the council. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze just threatened the governing body of Konoha with death if they tried to hurt his baby sister in any way. Civilians were either red in the face, pissed at how this boy threatened them with death if they tried to in their minds kill the demon, or they were pale thinking he was speaking the truth. The clan's heads, even Fugaku, were doing their best to hold back a smirk. Naruto definitely shut them up with that threat. Naruto turned towards Sarutobi and spoke, if that is all Hokage-sama, I have to go take care of my sister at the moment, he said, before he started walking back to the doors. Sarutobi snapped out of his shock before speaking, wait. We aren't finished here yet, Naruto-kun. I have decided to announce to the public about Mito's status as a Jinchuriki, only for them be put under a law that will signify they speak of it to the younger generation they will be put to death. He said, speaking the truth, since he had planned on this to happen just in case. The civilians looked at Sarutobi like he was an idiot for saying they should be punished, only to get a warning glance from the man which shut them up quickly. Naruto on the outside was impassive, but on the inside he was furious with Sarutobi for what he was doing. He was practically announcing to the public his baby sister was a big target to them. He balled up his fists, which started making his knuckles turn white and blood dripping from his hand. He looked over his shoulder at Sarutobi and glared at him. Very well, but be warned, Sarutobi got gasps from everyone. He disrespected the Hokage. Even if they mumble a single insult or try anything, they will die no matter what you say. This is clan business at the moment, and they try to hurt or kill an heir of our clan, and if they try anything, not even you will stop me from killing anyone that tries it. Be damned them civilians or clan members. Anyone that tries will meet their end by myself. He said before walking out the door, ignoring the gawking from the whole entire council. Tsume was now grinning. Naruto was now appointed as the first person in her book to shut up the council, threaten the Hokage, and now threaten clan heads as well. Yes, Naruto was definitely Kushina's son. And the years went on like normal, except Naruto had buried his parents in the field of their clan home, marking it with a tombstone with the Namikaze and Uzumaki symbol. It stated, "Here lies two of the most well-loved people in Konoha. Kushina Uzumaki and Minato, Namikaze, mother and father of two. These two were powerful in their right, stronger than anyone of their generation and above. Though they died fighting the Kyuubi, they still died with a smile on their face. They will be missed by all, but much more by the children they protected." Over the years, also after the announcement was made, the villagers were like Naruto predicted, hateful and tried everything, but they only ended up getting killed by Naruto or arrested before he got to them. Sometimes it was a match between himself and the Hokage as to who would get to them first. Also, as he took care of Mito, he had to sped up his training to go on missions to help take care of himself and Mito. So with astonishable speed he sped through the ranks of the shinobi, making Chunin at the age of 7, Jounin at the age of 9, and shockingly, and with the respect of the whole Anbu. Anbu Captain Commander at the age of 13, something that shocked everyone. But his best friend Itachi has also grown and rose through the ranks and became Anbu Captain at the age of 13. They both were respected in Konoha and prodigies never seen in a century. Over the years, Naruto had made friends with plenty of people from the Inuzuka clan Erhana, also with Yugao Yuzuki, Kurana Yuhi and Anko Mitarashi. Jiraiya over the years had come to visit them, and the first time he came he was given a decision from Naruto on who he would help more if the time came to it. Him and Mito or Sarutobi. It took a while, but Jiraiya had gotten Naruto's full respect and trust when he bowed his head, saying he would help them when the time came. Naruto had also visited Itachi during the years with Mito and was accepted by some in the Uchiha clan, especially by Mikoto and little Sasuke. Fugaku though was shrewd to Naruto and would a chances glare at the little Mito. Mito over the years she had grown up like a little Kushina. She was quite the tomboy and had the fiery attitude Kushina had. Though when she trained she excelled in Kenjutsu, Taijutsu and surprisingly few in Jutsu. Although when she had trouble her Ani-san would help her when she needed it. That was something else. She completely adored her big brother. He was her hero, the one who protected her, told her stories of her parents, held her when she cried after hearing what was sealed inside her. She was told by him since he didn't want others to mix up the words to make her think differently. He was there to help her when she needed it. She looked up to Naruto and trained to be like him. Naruto though raised her to be who she wanted to be. He couldn't break her of the habit of playing pranks, something he found very enjoyable. He himself of the years had grown beyond what others knew ever since that night with the Kyuubi attack and him meeting Megami. He had received information a week later about his role in Abelites as her avatar, and when he learned that they had different Abelites, he pushed himself even farther to master them. Though he did this in secret, no one knew of this, not even Itachi knew, though the man suspected something. Naruto overall was stronger than anyone ever knew as a shinobi. He was holding quite a bit back from everyone, even the Hokage who he at the moment was starting to hate as the years went by. He was always training when he had the time, using Kage Bushins, when he could not many to make him get chakra exhaustion, but still many. At the moment he was a Fujutsu master, ninjutsu expert, he was fluent in Taijutsu, matching guy himself. In Kenjutsu he was unmatched by everyone. He could wield a katana masterfully like he had done it his whole life. Secretly he had read the notes on his father's Hiraishin no Jutsu and decided he would make that a type of ninjutsu class called Jiken Kuken, had secretly made a few jutsu if the situation called for it. But at the moment he hasn't showed it to anyone. He also learned one technique he took great pleasure in. It was called Ho-Ho or Shunpo. It was something needed with spiritual energy. It was a speed movement skill that increased his speed beyond measures. Though when he mastered it he never stopped training to get him even faster than before. He could honestly say if he told anyone of his true status that he was as fast as his father when he used the Hiraishin no Jutsu. Though he was proficient to him anyway as a shinobi. He quite immersed himself in being Megami's avatar, and through the years he meditated and finally met his Anpakudo spirit, and when he did he was shocked to see a young teen around his age, wearing a black cloak with teared ends at the bottom. The man had introduced himself as his inner spirit, and Naruto couldn't have been happier. The guy reminded him of himself when he was doing a mission. Over the years he learned that the teen's name was Zangetsu. That day also sparked when his weapon he received at becoming Megami's avatar changed forever. It changed into a giant cleaver that was as tall as he was and grew as he did. The sharpened end was white with the blunt end black as night. The handle had no guard and had what looked like medical tape wrapped around it, leaving behind a long flowing end of it when he unveiled it. The Zanpakudo had told him that it was called Shikai, a form that manifested what his spirit was. He also learned techniques called Kido. They were like ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, but so much different than the others. He had learned that you concentrate your spiritual energy and speak the incantation instead of doing hand signs like ninjutsu. Over the years he had practiced and mastered a few that were ranked from 1 to 80 on all classes. Ranging from Bakudo and Heido. He learned that one was for sealing or stopping one target or multiple, and the other was like the other, except it was more of the offensive spells. He heard of Mito mentioning something about Kyuubi, and he was shocked to hear that Kyuubi said she was sorry. And from what Mito had told him of what little she could, she said Kyuubi was sorry for what she had done, and explained all that happened. He decided on that day Madara Uchiha was his prime target. Also during his duties and raising Mito, he made himself a reputation among Konoha as the demon's guardian, though he didn't care what they said. He brought that title up full blast when he crucified a villager to the wall in Konoha Square for punching Mito. After that incident he was looked at with fear and anger at the same time, knowing if they tried to get to Mito, they would die by his hand alone. As the captain commander of the Anbu Corps he was respected beyond anything with them, and that with his position, he never showed his face or identity to enemy villages. Though that didn't mean he doesn't have enemies in Konoha as well. The first was the villagers in Konoha. They always tried to hurt Mito, and he would stop and kill those that even tried. Those that did land a hit on her was tortured with a genjutsu of them watching as Naruto killed their family before killing them when they're physically and mentally broken. Another enemy was the council. After the council meeting all those years ago, he had made an enemy of the civilians and the respect and protection of the Inuzuka, Aburam, Nara, Yamanaka and Akamichi. Yugaku though was neutral to him, as well was Hiashi for reasons unknown. The elders were always pushing for Mito to be made as a weapon or executed or made as a breeding stock when she was old enough. This made Naruto unleash chakra, slamming them into the ground and ripping off one of their limbs to make the point across if they tried. He was watching. And lastly was Hiruzen. The man was always trying to take Mito away from him, claiming he was too young to raise the child. Well, he proved him wrong after all these years, and with the protection of over half the clan heads he was protected from the Hokage's attempts. He knew what the man was trying to do. He was trying to have her either live on the streets or live in his clan compound to separate her from him and make her loyal only to Konoha and trained as a weapon for only Sarutobi. He stopped that immediately with the fire Daimyo's presence, and since the man was a longtime friend of Minato, he was willing to help out. At the moment we find Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze walking down the road to the academy to pick up his now 8-year-old sister from the academy. As he passed through the streets he ignored the glares from the men or lust-filled looks from the women. That's right, Naruto was getting those looks, it seems, from him being the last male of his clan, and added with his look, he was one of the most wanted men in Konoha. At the moment the Namikaze had grown to 5'7" and wore his normal attire of black shinobi sandals, black jounin pants and a long-sleeved black shirt. Over this was a anbu chestplate with 2 pouches on his right and left thigh. One for shuriken, kunai, senbo and ninja wire. The other was for storage scrolls and customized seal tags. He was wearing metal-plated fingerless gloves, as well as a Konoha headband tied around his waist like a belt. He had Anbu standard ninjado on his back, as well as his kitsune mask on the side of his face, showing himself to the public. The mask was Mito's idea and he did it for her, and plus it really scared the populace when they saw it. Overall this was a black trench coat with the Uzumaki and Namikaze symbol of the back, as well as Anbu Kyapitan Commanda, Anbu Captain Commander, in kanji. As he walked the people went around him since his aura just screamed danger to those that pissed him off. When he reached the academy he frowned seeing Mito sitting on a swing being glared at by the civilian families. Some were scowling at her while some were spouting insults at her. His blood began to boil before walking to his sister. As he did so the hidden Anbu who just arrived as the personal bodyguards for Commander mentally gulped and knew their commander wasn't gonna show pity to those villagers even if children were with them. When Naruto was behind the families, he raised his hand and grabbed one civilian's head and with surprising strength lifted the man who was one of the few spouting insects at his sister and actually threw him into a wall, making it crack and cave in. After he did this, he ignored the frightened looks he was getting from the children or horrified looks from the adults and walked up to Mito as the crowd made way for him. When that was done, he walked up to the sad Mito, who had her head hung low with her red hair covering her eyes. Naruto saw the tears falling down her face before he got on his knees and spoke. "Hey there, Mito-chan, ready to go home?" he said. Mito went rigid. She knew that voice. She snapped her head up to see Naruto smiling at her warmly as the tears fell from her face. "Naruto Nai-san," she yelled before jumping onto his chest, hugging him. He smiled while patting her head. As he did so, he looked back at the glaring crowd and released a burst of his kai, shutting them up. He then looked back at Mito and sees her looking at him with cheerful violet eyes. He smiled before speaking. "Well, ready to go home, Mito-chan," he said. "Yeah, but first can we go to Ichiraku? I'm hungry and I wanna see old man Tuichi and Amni-san," she said, which he smiled again. Those two were probably the only civilians that respected Tu-san's wish and helped her when he wasn't around. "Sure, let's go," he said before putting her on his shoulder and walking out of the Shinobi Academy fields. As he did so, he looked on ahead, thinking on what his latest mission had detailed. It seemed Iwa was getting restless since they found out Minato and Kushina, two of the most hated people in Iwa, had children, and since they didn't know of his status as Captain Commander and heard of Mito, they were trying anything to kill her. Even risking war. He scowled as his eyes flashed a bright blue that wasn't gonna happen anytime soon as long as he was alive. He looked up at a grinning Mito and smiled. His sister was his light, if he had to say. She was the thing that kept him from obliterating Konoha from the ground it sits on. If it wasn't for her, Itachi, Yugao and some of his friends, he would have done it and slaughtered most of Konoha's population. "Hey, Mito-chan, wanna go see Itachi and his family later on?" he said, which her eyes snapped wide and grinned before jumping on his shoulder. Yeah, let's go, I wanna see Itachi Nai again," she said. Naruto smirked before walking ahead, not knowing the future was going to be full of strife for him and Mito. 2 years later. It's been 2 years, and things have went great for Naruto and Mito. The two, along with Naruto's friends, have been able to keep the council and villagers off his back because of Mito. Though Sarutobi was getting desperate and would often challenge him in clan laws on ways to adopt a child from an unfit parent. Naruto always countered by saying he has raised Mito and she turned out great and wouldn't let him turn her into a tool for him to use and discard. Though their training along with Itachi's went great. Mito, with the help of her brother, was at high genin level alone with the studies and training she had done. She was intermediate in Fuinjutsu, low chunin in ninjutsu. Jinjutsu was non-existent, except to be able to dispel all with the help from Kyuubi. Her Taijutsu, with the help of her brother, was high chunin, and with her mother's sword and help from Naruto, she was high chunin to low jounin in Kinjutsu. Overall, she was quite the skilled shinobi. Though she never stopped thanking Naruto whenever he helped her train. Itachi was someone Naruto was positive he could call a brother. The teen was to him a little brother looking for ways to either get out of situations without violence or ending it quick. He helped Itachi get stronger for the past 2 years, and even before that. He helped Itachi get stronger to be one of the most powerful shinobi in Konoha. Naruto himself, though, hadn't changed all that much, except for being a 15-year-old. He could beat Sarutobi now. Even if the man was in his prime, he wouldn't stand a chance. No one knew Naruto's true power except Zangetsu. Though Itachi always suspected something. His skills as a shinobi have only went up more since the last 2 years being the captain commander of the Anbu Corps. His skills in ninjutsu were extraordinary. Fuinjutsu, he had passed his father in the art and was on par and close to passing his mother's level as well. Taijutsu was something he added with his Kinjutsu, with him always doing physical exercises that would make guys say it was crazy to do, made him past guys' level and beyond. Ninjutsu was something he took pride in and could honestly say the 7 swordsmen couldn't hold a candle to him. His speed added with the power of each swing was uncatchable and looked nothing except a blur. His skills as a Shinigami have skyrocketed though as he grew up over the last 2 years. His talking with Zangetsu and training in the art of Kido had done wonders. He had grew more attached to the Zanpakuto like it was his arm he was swinging instead. And with Kido he had mastered 81 to 99, though the latest ones on both Bakudo and Heido still needed a bit more practice. He had also created a way of healing with Kido, but needed no incantations. Just concentrated spiritual energy. His speed, though, with Ho-Ho had went past even Zangetsu's expectations. He was nigh uncatchable in that aspect. No one was as fast as he was. Though no one has seen his true power yet anyway. Although his greatest achievement was raising to the next level of his Zanpakuto, something called Bankai Zangetsu had said was only done before by Megami herself. He was quite proud he achieved the next level, though it was hard to control at first, but he had done it and had to say Bankai was only gonna be a last resort when he needed it. Though even if he was stronger than anyone even truly knew he wasn't arrogant and flaunted his abilities. He was cool-headed and emotionally balanced to handle any situation that called for it. Though there was a share of problems as well. First off, Konoha's civilian populace was getting more brave to actually try and attack him head-on with a few shinobi as well, thinking they had him outnumbered. They were wrong and paid the price. He made an example out of them and showed their mutilated corpse that if they tried it again, he would do something far worse than this. That shut them up only for them to come back a week later in bigger numbers. Also, Iwa was getting much more desperate and it showed when they sent an assassin to kill Naruto and Mito. When this happened and Naruto stopped and killed the assassin. He had placed the body in a box and written a message to the Tsuchikage that if he tried again, he would be starting something he would regret later on. This didn't deter the Iwa Cage, it actually made him try harder and harder than before. It was putting the strain of war breaking out once more. There was also another problem, but it was within his own mind. There was something trying to get out and he didn't know what it was, and he had asked Zangetsu only to get a silent "I don't know" myself. This kinda freaked him out but didn't stop him from his life. Though everything changed when the day came when the Tsuchikage declared war on Konoha. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, shinobi of Konoha, avatar to Megami goddess of death and Anbu Kyaputan commander, was standing around his personal squad, the ones he had grew up with and trained with. Each were strong in their own right. And right now they were having a meeting about the declaration of war with Konoha, all because of a grudge from Iwa. First one to speak was Nico aka Yugao Yuzuki. Naruto commanded, "Sir, what are we to do with the situation at hand? War has been declared by Iwa and we personally don't have the resources for another war." She said. Weasel aka Itachi Uchiha and Naruto's best friend nodded. "That's true, sir. After the third shinobi war and Kyuubi's attack, we just don't have the shinobi to win this war. I know we've pulled through and through in history through all three wars, but this time it's different. We are limited to shinobi and resources. It would personally take a miracle to win this war," Sira said in a monotone voice. Inu aka Hana Inuzuka hung her head. "Yeah, and it's even worse, with half of Konoha calling for a trade with you and Mito-chan to stop the upcoming war." She said as a tear fell from her face. Yugao turned their attention to Mito, who was sleeping on the couch. Naruto were now as cold as ice and the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. The others tensed up as they saw their leader's gaze. "Let them try and trade us, because just like Iwa, those fools in Konoha will suffer for their insolence." He stood up with his battle gear ready and informed the Hokage that "I'll be going to Iwa's borders to deal with the invading force," Mysel said, getting shocked looks from them all. "Well, what? Naruto-senpai, master, you can't be serious," said Yugao. "We know you're strong, Naruto, but to face a battalion alone of Chunin and elite Jounin would even be tough for the Hokage to deal with, and you're saying you are gonna go face 3 battalions alone?" Hana protested, not wanting her friend to go in something like that alone. Naruto smirked and tightened his gloves. "You forget, Hana-chan, that my father was capable of such a feat," and Lastly said with his eyes narrowed. "Don't compare me to that old fool. He is nowhere even close to my level, and I'm stronger than I look," He stated, and they still looked skeptic until Itachi spoke up. "Senpai is right. He alone can deal with the invading force without any help," said with a small smile on his face. "Besides, even when I fight him, he never revealed all of his skills, and plus he isn't the Anbu captain commander for nothing." But what about Mito-chan? With you gone and us being on guard, she'll be defenseless?" Hana asked. "It's already being taken care of," Dottie said, and that was when a puff of smoke exploded into the room and the others jumped to their feet with their blades ready until it cleared, revealing a grinning Jiraiya. "Fear not, younglings, because your savior, the gallant Jiraiya, is here too." Damn. Thud. An annoyed Naruto gave the man a brain duster to the skull and sending him face first into the ground, causing his subordinates to sweat drop. "Now's not the time, Irokaifu," Naruto said in an annoyed tone. Said Sennin got up, rubbing the back of his head, glaring at his godson. Mito sat up, stirring in her sleep, and slowly opened her eyes to see her godfather, and her eyes lit up. Before Jiraiya could make an retort at his student son, a red blur glumped his leg, made him stumble back a little. He looked down and saw Mito look up at him with a grin on her face. He grinned back and picked her up. "Well, if it isn't my favorite godchild," Mito-chan said and tickled her sides, making her giggle. Naruto smiled at this. Despite being a pervert to women, he loved Mito to death and always tried to spoil her when Naruto wasn't around. "Guess what? Me and you are going on a little field trip while your brother deals with those bakas from Iwa," said, making her eyes light up. "As for you, Naruto, be careful out there, because I'll drag you out of limbo and beat the crap out of you if you leave your Yamato here all alone," He said in a serious tone. Naruto just snorted before walking over to his Kyofu and Mito. When he looked at Mito, he saw her worried eyes and smiled. He put a hand on her head and ruffled her hair, making her pout cutely as he spoke. "That's not gonna happen, Kyofu. I wouldn't even dream of leaving her alone, and especially with a pervert like Yao," said with a teasing grin. Jiraiya just glared at his godson before smiling and patting him on the back. Naruto just nodded at him before looking once more at Mito. "I'll see you later, Mito-chan, be good for Iro Kyofu." "Now you hear," he said, which she just smiled, though he could see in her eyes that she was planning something. "Of course nice, and I wouldn't darish," said with a oh so innocent tone. Naruto just grinned before kissing her forehead, making a tint of pink appear on her face. Kyuubi within Mito's seal watched on and grinned as little Mito-chan feeling embarrassed that her big strong brother kissed her. Kyuubi said. This made Mito blush bright red. "And no, it isn't like that," Mito said, but she could still hear Kyuubi snickering. "Then, I'll see you later then." He looked at Jiraiya and nodded. The man nodded as well before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Naruto then looked at his squad and gave out his order. "Right, then you know your orders, move out," he said. They saluted before dispersing. Kami's realm. Within the realm of Kami was two figs watching through a glowing screen of the happening in the elemental countries. These two figures were both female from the curves you could see and the female features they had. The first was Megami, goddess of death. She had changed her body to that of a 16-year-old woman. She was wearing the same kimono from when she first met Naruto, but it hugged her perfect hergless figure and didn't leave anything to imagine. Her S were a perky C cup and the kimono showed a bit of cleavage. The other was Kami, goddess of life and sister to Megami. She had pale porcelain skin like her sister, but had low flowing silver hair with glowing golden eyes that radiated power and wisdom. She was wear the exact opposite of her sister, but no footwear. She wore a white kimono hugging her figure as well, exposing her perfectly round and perky S. Kami at the moment was watching her sister's avatar heading to war. She had at first heatedly disagreed with her sister on giving a human her blessing, since the last time they did that it only threw the world it is now into chaos. But that was squashed down as she watched a boy no man grow up and train to get stronger, and she, like her sister, was at first perplexed and interested in Naruto. She and Megami though frowned when they saw him heading off to war, though they knew this would happen sooner or later. Alfred, she and her sister secretly wanted to see what Naruto was capable of. Iwa border. 3 battalions of Iwa consisting of Chunin, Elite Jounin, and Anbu were waiting with anticipation to break into Konoha and kill the last Namikazes, as well as make the village pay for what Minato and Kushina did during the war. As they were about to break the border, their eyes widened in horror when they saw the son of their most hated enemy appear before them, walking towards their position with a stone-cold and murderous gaze locked onto them. They all started to get nervous as his gaze was so much similar to Minato's. Don't be afraid. Just because he's the son of that man and his bitch of a wife doesn't mean he can take on all of us, the commander said of the battalion stated, until they were all finding it quite difficult to breathe because Naruto was using his spiritual pressure to make them all break into cold sweat and swore. They saw a menacing figure with a scythe hovering over Naruto. "For that comment on my mother you'll be the last to die," Naruto said in a dark and dangerous tone, before holding out his right hand, and in a flash of light, Zangetsu appeared wrapped up fully with medical tape. He unveiled it showing his partner in all his glory. This intimidated quite a few of the already terrified Iwanin. He suddenly took a step and vanished, causing them to go on the defense, and unknown to them, he was already cutting them down at speeds that surpassed even his father's. Was that the Haration? One Jounin asked his colleagues, but Naruto appeared in front of 3 squads with Zangetsu drawn out, and the next that happened was forever plastered on the Iwa commander's face. Blood, limbs, and screams of pure agonizing pain filled the air as the 3 squadrons were all cut to shreds and were either dead or close to dying. No, that was a technique I created and learned called Shunpo or Flash Step. He vanished once again and in slow motion appeared behind the only remaining ninja. "And the one I just killed you with is currently called Senka," he said as he sheathed his blade on his back, and blood shot out of the Iwa commander's chest area, where the heart is and spinal column. "And as for your Tsuchikage, he and his village are about to get a wake-up call," he finished as the man fell to his knees. "Damn you Namikaze," he coughed out and fell to the ground. "No, damn your village and your leader's ignorance, fool," he said, and starts to leave the area. As he does so, he mentally feels that feeling again, like someone or something trying to erupt from his mind. He shook his head and shunposed to the Iwa village. Inoki, the current Tsuchikage of Iwagakure, wasn't happy and at the moment was slamming his fists onto his desk. Why? Because an anbu he sent to check up on the invading force on Konoha came back and told him that they were all massacred with no survivors. As he pondered on what he was going to do next, he looked out his window and his eyes widened in terror and horror as he saw Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze hovering over the village and staring right at the man, and then aimed his right hand at the tower. "This is a message to you and anyone else who dares to harm those precious to me, you old fool. Had number 88.HIRYUGEKIZOKUSHINTENRAIHO Flying Dragon Striking Heaven Shaking Thunder Cannon. He called out as he fires a gigantic beam of electrical and spiritual energy that hits the cage tower, and truly enormous explosion that not only engulfs the tower, but 1/4 of the village as well. As Naruto watched the mayhem he caused, he felt slightly guilty for killing the innocent, but if it wasn't their leader, then none of this would have happened. With that he turned around and shunpoed away, leaving his mark and message at the entrance of the gate. It stated, "You wanted a war. Well, you got one and paid the price for it." From Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. This event was recorded in history called the Massacre of Iwa. Kami's realm. The two goddess who had seen the destruction was shocked at how strong Naruto was and how he handled Iwa. It was just too fast even for them. Bugami, though, was beaming with pride. Her avatar was making her feel the ultimate feeling of pride, knowing the man walking the living world was her embodiment on earth, the one who represented death to those that crossed her. Kami, though, was staring at Naruto with half-lidded eyes that showed emotion Megami had caught, and she smirked. It was lust. At her avatar, oh yes, she couldn't wait to start teasing her about this piece of information. Fire Country border. After leaving Iwa in chaos and killing most of its shinobi that followed after him, he had arrived in record time at the border in Fire Country. He then bit his finger and swiped it over his hand and started doing hand signs. Shimkan rib su reverse summoning, he stated before vanishing in a puff of smoke. With Jiraiya. As Jiraiya played with Mito around on the Toad Mountain, he couldn't help but be a little worried for his godson. Going against Iwa alone was suicide to any normal human. Sure, Minato did the same thing and came out with a victory that ended the Third Shinobi War, but even he had trouble standing after pushing his body past its limits. As he caught Mito hiding behind a tree, he heard a puff of smoke and turned around to see his godson appear in a reverse summoning. He looked and saw the only different thing about him was the giant cleaver on his back and the cold eyes that were slowly becoming warm seeing his sister, but nothing else out of the ordinary. Mito looked up to see the sound of poofing to see her beloved Ani-san. She smiled cheerfully as her eyes lit up. As Naruto looked at Jiraiya, he felt a red blur tackle into his chest, making him stumble back a bit before falling on the ground. He rubbed his head a bit before blinking. He looked downward to see Mito staring at him with her big violet orbs, which glistened with tears. He smiled as he wiped away the oncoming tears and eyes. "What's wrong, Imato-chan?" he said in a soothing tone. She visibly relaxed at her brother's touch and voice. She always did as she grew up. His voice was the thing that always made her feel safe and relaxed. She pushed her face into his chest as she spoke. "I thought you were gonna be hurt again. She said, sniffling a little, since on the inside as her Kyofu took her away was deathly worried for her brother, and seeing him now healthy with not a scratch on him made her feel safe again. Naruto just blinked before grinning a devilish grin. He snaked his hands to her sides before tickling her, making her burst out into giggles as she rolled off of him. "Haha, how's that, Mito-chan? This is for believing I wouldn't get back," Injured said as he continued his torture on his poor little sister. He stopped a few minutes later before picking up Mito, who was blue in the face from the lack of air, and sat her on his lap like he used to when she was a little girl. He looked at Jiraiya and she leaned into her brother's warmth. Her head was popped up on his chest where she was facing Jiraiya as well. Jiraiya watched them with a smile on his face, as the two actually reminded him of Minato and Kushina when they were younger, but he shook his head before speaking. "So how did it go?" he said. "They were stopped like I said. Nothing else to it," Kaifu said, hiding how he destroyed a quarter of the village itself. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes on Naruto. He was hiding something and knew it would either be bad or good. He didn't know. Cause at the moment he just needed more answers. "I see. Well, what will you do in Konoha? Because of your actions, it will be regarded back on Konoha, seeing as they have someone like you able to destroy armies like that with little effort like your Tusan, then things will be tense with the countries." Naruto nodded as he ran a hand through Mito's hair. "I know this, but that won't deter me from protecting my precious people, Kyofu, and you know this better than anyone," he said. Jiraiya grinned warmly before walking over to his godchildren and gave them a hug. "Yeah, and I have to say I'm proud of both you, the way you're both turning out in life, and both your Ka-san and Tusan would be proud as well," he said. Naruto nodded before he looked down and saw Mito asleep in his lap with her arms wrapped around him and head buried in his chest. He blinked before picking her up gently in his arms and stood up. He shifted her in a bridal carry with her head leaning onto him. He kissed her forehead once more before he looked at his Kyofu with a serious eye. "Kyofu, let's go back to Konoha. I'm sure they're looking for results, though I'm sure most already know by now," he said. "Yeah, you're probably right, though Sarutobi might be pissed after what you did," he said. "Like I care what the old fool thinks. He has no say in what I do or who I protect. I'm sorry, Kyofu, but the man to me is nothing more than old fool that thinks he can control me," he said. Jiraiya nodded sadly, knowing his godson was right. Sarutobi had tried for years to either control Naruto or take Mito away from him. "Now let's go," said before muttering a small Shimkan rib su before disappearing in a puff of smoke, as did Jiraiya. "Hanahagakure." When news had spread of what was going on and exactly who was sent to counter Iwa's invading force, the shinobi of Konoha were skeptic if Naruto would be able to do what his father was able to do, as well as a few civilians that got along with him and Mito. That's when news had traveled of Iwa's invading 3 battalions completely massacred with no survivors. This got cheers from all the shinobi, knowing if it wasn't for Naruto they would have lost. They all knew they were still weak from the 3rd Shinobi War, and added with Kyuubi's attack, made it all the worse for him. But thanks to Naruto, the newly and highly respected captain commander of the Anbu Corps was able to put an end to it. What was more shocking was Iwa, the village itself being attacked with over a quarter itself being obliterated and the cage tower along with it. This had served as a warning to Iwa to not try attacking again of petty reasons. They only hoped Naruto would come back soon. Sarutobi though was sweating bullets to do what Naruto did was completely amazing, something that was only told in war stories, when Minato completely decimated a battalion of Iwanin in 1 minute flat. What Naruto did was going to be told in legends to come for being a man wiping out not 1 or 2, but 3 battalions of Iwa's finest ranging from Chunin, Elite Jounin and Anbu. And add the fact he destroyed a quarter of Iwa was telling him there was more to Naruto than he or anyone else knew. Naruto's squad that was on frontline guard duty heard the news the first though and had funny reactions. Even though they all knew Naruto was strong, they never expected him to not only destroy 3 battalions of Iwanin, but also destroy a quarter of Iwa itself. Oh yeah, they were definitely not gonna underestimate Naruto again. Itachi just smiled knowing his brother figure best friend had done something legendary and saved Konoha from imminent destruction. The said squad who were at the gate suddenly saw 2 figures appeared a few yards away from the main gate. When they sensed out who they were, they completely left their posts and shoeshined to them. As Naruto walked with Mito in his arms sleeping peacefully with Jiraiya beside them, they felt 3 presences heading their way and smiled when they knew who it was. They all appeared in front of them before Hana and Yugao surrounded Naruto checking for injuries, as Itachi just walked up to him and pat his shoulder. "Welcome back, Naruto-senpai," said. Naruto smiled as Hana and Yugao stopped fussing over him before giving him a hug. No one noticed Itachi's slight twitch at the scene, that was before they jumped back hiding their blush. Naruto just blinked owlishly before he smiled. He checked to see Mito still asleep in his arms. He looked up at his squad and announced, "Iwa is awfully surrendered, they have been crippled and cannot even put up a defensive. So there is no more to worry about for a long time, so let's go home, guys," Dottie said, which they all nodded at. But that they all walked back to Konoha waiting what the future would bring them. It's been 3 days since the invading force of Iwa was stopped and slaughtered, as well as Iwa having a quarter of it being destroyed. This had also set events to happen. The survivors that seen what Naruto did had put him in the Iwa Bingo book as one of the most dangerous men in the shinobi nations. Fumo's Reikage was excited to see Minato's and Kushina's son do what he did to Iwa, and especially the message he carved in the entrance into Iwa's village. That had set the record of Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze being entered into the Bingo book. Tsuna and the other neighboring villages were wary of Konoha now, since they had someone like him in their ranks. The day Naruto came back to Konoha, he was surrounded by shinobi, all giving him cheers of what he did, and civilians bowing in respect despite what he had done in the past and their past sins against him and his sister. He still saved them from destruction, and they owed him that much. Sandaime though, when he confronted Naruto about it later that day, earned a glare from Naruto, telling the man what he does is not his business, since he was the commander of the Anbu Corps. He has special laws made for that position of what he does on personal levels is not dictated by the current cage of Konoha, so the man couldn't do anything about it. That same night Mito never left Naruto's side. She stayed with him every second till it was bedtime, and even then she wanted to be by his side. Him fighting a war must have really worried her. It had been the next day, and he heard bombarding sounds coming from his door that morning, so when he left Mito tucked back in bed, he went to open the door, only to be bombarded with questions from Anko and Kurenai to see if he was alright. He just waved off their concerns, saying he was alright. That seemed to calm them down. On the 3rd day, as he recovered, although he wasn't tired at all, he was called into a council meeting to discuss of what happened, and he wasn't really in the mood. All he really wanted to do was spend time with his Amato. Was that too much to ask? He still remembers that when he scared the civilian council shitless and stopping most of Sarutobi's questions about his weapon. That's right, he now fully let Zangetsu sheathed on his back, since for one he wasn't gonna hide his partner anymore, 2 it was intimidating as hell to see him walking down the street with Zangetsu on his back, and 3. It was fun seeing Yugao going gaga over the weapon. Now after 2 weeks things have been going back to normal, except that feeling in his mind was getting stronger with each passing day, and it was starting to worry him. Though this didn't deter him from training or helping Mito with her training when she needed it. It also didn't stop him from going back to duty and doing missions with his squad, although he has been seeing Itachi acting strange lately. That was something else. Itachi was hiding something, and being childhood friends for so long it worried him, and he promised himself he would get to the bottom of what was wrong with him. He also strangely kept visiting Mikoto and little Sasuke ever since he heard about Fugaku becoming even more entrenched in his clan. He was worried about the two. So when he came to visit he would talk with Mikoto while teaching Sasuke things he needed to know in the current grade he was in at the academy. This sparked a budding friendship with Mikoto. He always remembered Kase-and being best friends with a woman and had to say Mikoto was fun being around. And little Sasuke, despite having a similar attitude like Fugaku's, was easy to tease or get him mad. He also spent time with his squad when they weren't on duty, and with Anko and Kurenai as well. Though he was noticing some weird things happening with Mito, she would sometimes always blush when she looked at him, while her eyes were always flashing red a few times when she looked at him, as did a few other women he knew. He may be a genius of a shinobi, but he was dense as ever when it came to women. At the moment we find our blonde hero walking around Anbu HQ after finishing a solo S-rank mission to Kusa country. As he was walking he thought about getting Mito and taking her out to Ichiraku after academy the day was over with. That's when he looked up and saw a sight he thought he would never see. Itachi was waiting at the door with a distressed look on his face, while a scroll was tightly gripped in his hands. Naruto frowned. For as long as he knew Itachi, he has never seen him look this emotional before. Sure, they made small jokes around each other, but this was different. Something happened. So with speed unrivaled by anyone he appeared beside Itachi, who had yet to even realize his presence. This made him even more worried. Itachi was always the first one to know he appears at team meetings. "Itachi, what's wrong?" he said, worried for his best friend. When he saw Itachi stiffen he knew something was up and decided he would find out what was going. He asked again, "Itachi, turn around and tell me what's wrong," Naruto said once more. Itachi sighed. He didn't know Naruto was near him till he spoke, but he just came at a very bad time. He had been hiding this for as long as he could and didn't want Naruto to know about it. Seems fate didn't listen. Beside, before turning to Naruto, "Naruto, can we talk in private? There's too many ears," he said, looking around the area. Naruto frowned. Before nodding he grabbed onto Itachi's shoulder and using Shushin. They appeared in the Namikaze compound. When he let go of Itachi's shoulder, he made a cage bushin and told it to go get Mito. The clone nodded before disappearing. After this Naruto closed all the blinds and activated silencing seals. After this he looked at the now nervous Itachi, who was still staring at the scroll in his hands. "Itachi, explain to me what's going on," said with a "don't argue with me" tone. Itachi flinched before looking Naruto in the eye. "Well, if I'm gonna be explaining myself I better do so in my true form," said, which shocked Naruto. Itachi put his hands up in a hand sign and muttered "Kai" before a poof of smoke erupted from Itachi's body, covering him completely. Naruto had to shield his eyes before THS smoke dissipated. As it did so Naruto was beyond shocked. Where once stood his best friend Itachi Uchiha stood a long raven-haired woman in the same clothes Itachi was wearing. Only difference, it hugged her figure like a second skin, and the chest plate armor didn't hide the perky C cup S showing from her chest. Her heart-shaped face and cold black eyes looked back at him as bangs fell in front of her face. Naruto just blinked, slowly digesting what he was seeing. Basically it was a clone of Mikoto in his opinion. Said woman looked at the ground. "And on Naruto, this is my true form, this is who I really am," said the woman. Naruto just thought about what she said and his eyes went wide in shock, that is until he saw her eyes that held a bit of pleading and acceptance. He mentally cringed. Those kind of eyes always broke him, one of his small weaknesses. He rubbed the back of his head and spoke. "So I'm guessing you're actually a female," he said. "Yes," said. Naruto frowned. "Why hide it?" he said. "It was because Fugaku placed the genjutsu on me to look male because he wanted only sons and not a daughter in the family. But Kase-and always helped me when I needed emotional support when father became strict on my training." She said. Naruto scowled at this. Fugaku to do such a thing made him want to kill the man, but first. "Then why didn't you tell me? I am your best friend, aren't I? Don't you trust me enough to keep this a secret?" he said. The woman snapped her head up at him and let tears start to fall from her eyes. "I didn't know what you would think of me. I didn't want the only person to bring me out of my cold persona to leave me if he found out the truth," said as she fell to her knees crying. Naruto was there in an instant, holding her to his chest as he rubbed her back in comforting gestures. He still was trying to wrap it around his mind. His best friend since childhood, the Itachi he grew up with, trained with, did missions with, was actually a female and was actually scared of telling him the truth. He pulled himself back and raised her head by her chin till she was looking him in the eyes. "You have nothing to be scared about. I would have accepted you either way. No, we not start telling me your true name," he said. This made her emotions break and wrapped her arms around his head and cried and wailed into his shoulder as he held her. Knowing this might take a while, after she had calmed down a bit she looked at him and spoke. "My true name, the one Kase-and gave me, is Hitomi Uchiha," Hitamish said. Naruto actually grinned, the name fit her perfectly. That's a beautiful name, Hitomi-chan, it fits you. Now Hitomi, I need you to explain what's been bugging you for the past few weeks. He said. Hitomi actually blushed at his compliment before she remembered why she was here. Naruto-kun, it's a long story, but let me start by explaining what my clan has been planning. With that, Hitomi started explaining the Uchiha clan with her father, planning a coup d'etat and rebel against Konoha. She told him of how some members of the clan were innocent and didn't even know of the plan. She also explained her situation as a spy for her father in the Anbu. This way she could gather important information and hear on the Hokage's meetings, but she also told him of her undercover status being a double agent for Sarutobi and the council. She told him of Sarutobi's plan along with the elders to have her slaughter the clan so something like this wouldn't happen again. She even told him that when she tried to refuse, Sarutobi threatened her by having Sasuke getting a loyalty seal placed on him and Makoto used a breeding stock. That's when everything broke. She fell into his arms and cried her eyes out, asking, begging for any kind of help. While she told him all this, Naruto was deathly silent. His bangs covered his eyes as his grip on Hitomi was tighter and he kept pulling her closer into him to soothe her as much as he could. When the woman stopped crying, she looked up only to gasp, seeing Naruto's murderous and deadly stone-cold gaze. She could see his eyes changing bit by bit. Naruto grit his teeth before pulling away from Hitomi. He got up and pulled her up as well. Hitomi-chan, you should have told me this, Befra said. I didn't know if you would, said only to stop when Naruto hugged her as his chin was on her head. Of course I would have, you should have told me everything from the beginning. But I will tell you this, Hitomi-chan said, ignoring the fact he added the chan suffix to her name. Though Hitomi did notice and would file it for later. I will help you, be damned, I become an enemy of Konoha. You and I are friends, the best of friends, you know this, and you should know I'd do anything to help you. Now me and you are going to the Uchiha clan compound and find the ones who are planning this uprising, and the innocent ones will live. I hope you don't have any problems killing your father, do you, he said. She answered with no hesitation, hell no. I'll gladly kill him, she said. Naruto nodded once more before speaking. Good, I want you to give me the names of who the ones are planning the uprising. Also I'd suggest you put back on your itachi genjutsu just in case. I'm gonna help you lift this burden and help out your clan. Now once you have killed your father, I want you to get your mother, and if possible Sasuke can take them at our squad safe house. He said while walking up to his closet. She nodded with his planning and knew the innocent would be safe at the safe house. The seals Naruto implanted in the building wouldn't allow those with evil intentions would be blocked out. That's when she saw Naruto open up the closet to show a bunch of boxes and clothes. She watched curiously when he moved them out of the way and bit his finger, drawing blood. She watched when a white glow erupted from the closet. When it faded, it showed a closet full of scrolls that had kanji for something different. They ranged from weapons, medical herbs and medicine, personal fuinjutsu books and tags, family scrolls and books on nintai kenjutsu. She watched in fascination when he practically cleaned out the whole closet and started sealing everyone in Toha's own body. She remembered him making a pocket dimension seal used on the body, but this shocked her. When Naruto sealed the last bit of things he needed, he closed the door and looked at Hitomi and spoke. Now Hitomi, you know the plan. After we kill the ones trying to plan the coup, I'll have you take your Kasan and the ones that are innocent to the safe house. After you do this, activate the seals. Because after this I don't want them to feel what is gonna happen afterward, said, looking away from her 1 second before looking back at her. Do you understand, he said. Yes, Naruto-kun, but what about Mito-chan? And the rest of our friends? What will we do, she said, worried about her friends. Naruto just scowled before punching the wall behind him, making a 5-foot crater. This shouldn't be surprising since he had long since passed Tsunade's legendary strength, but the Namikaze compound was made of the thickest stone and improved with defensive seals. So what he basically just did was make a crater of pure chakra enchants, cement and steel. This got a wide-eyed look from Hitomi when she saw Naruto's eyes change once again to those eyes. The ones that showed he was willing to do anything to protect his precious people. I'm gonna do what I should have done a long time ago, Hitomi-chan. I'm gonna usurp the Hokage and take Mito away from here to the Fire Daimyo. When I leave the gate, I'm gonna leave a messenger bird for Yugao, Hana, Anko and Kurenai. They will be the only ones to know what has happened. After this, and I have Mito with me, I want you and your clan to follow me, okay, he said. Hitomi just nodded dumbly, still trying to wrap it around her mind, hearing Naruto going to usurp the Hokage and governing body of Konoha itself. She mentally chuckled. Naruto was always like that. He'd face a village and become its #1 enemy if it meant saving a friend in trouble. She stood up and went over to Naruto, and before he could do anything, she did something she had wished to do for a long time. She captured his lips in a passionate lip lock. Naruto went wide-eyed before remembering his first kiss with Megami and did what he did with her. He wrapped his arms around her and leaned deeper into the kiss, making her moan in surprise. He rubbed her back while they went against the wall. They continued this for a minute before breaking apart for air. When they separated they eyed each other before Hitomi smiled with a small blush on her face. "Thank you Naruto-kun, I just wanted to do that before we went separate ways for now." She said. Naruto just blinked before grinning. "Yeah, me too Hitomi-chan, who knows there might be more where that came from," said with a teasing grin. She blushed bright red before turning around. Let's go," mumbled. Naruto smirked before coming up from behind her and hugged her from behind. "Very well Haim, but first let me reinforce some more clones to go help get my sister." He said. Once he did that he grabbed her in a hug and shoo-shined to the outskirts of the Uchiha complex. 2 hours later we find Naruto's clones holding Mito Uzumaki Namikaze as they race through the woods getting to the outskirts of Konoha. As they did so Mito was asking why he was doing his and only said they needed to get away from Konoha for good and that he would explain later. At the Uchiha clan complex chaos was happening. Itachi and Naruto himself had already infiltrated the clan compound and were assassinating the traitors. They were officially found out and at the moment was killing off the planning traitors and was sparing the innocent, which had the innocent ones follow Itachi's clone and promised it will be explained later. Naruto dodged a kunai slash before kicking a Uchiha guard into a building and ducked under a Kaiten jutsu before doing hand signs himself. Kaiten. MISAIRUFUREIMINGUDORAGO and apostrophe Kaiten. "Dragon flaming Miss Lee," he stated before blowing a white flaming dragon, incinerating a group of Uchiha shinobi and burying a few buildings along with it. Naruto exhaled before looking at Hitomi's gobsmacked expression. He chuckled before speaking. "He had it mastered a bit ago. Anyways, let's get to your house. I have a feeling something bad is happening." He said, which Itachi nodded before they sped through the deserted or destroyed buildings. When they got there Naruto narrowed his eyes when he heard seeming, so he rushed in kicking the wall in and finding the source with Itachi following him. When they got there they saw Fugaku trying to stab Mikoto, which the woman was resisting the best she could despite her having resistance seals on her. Naruto's blood boiled over and shunpoed between Fugaku and Mikoto and kicking the man through the wall and standing protectively in front of Mikoto. He nodded at Itachi who nodded back, which she went outside to deal with Fugaku. While that was happening he looked back at Mikoto and started ripping off the resistance seals on her and helping her stand. Then Naruto-kun, what's going on? Why was Fugaku trying to kill me? Said as tears were glistening in her eyes. Naruto just closed his eyes and hugged the woman he had come to see as a very precious person in his life and let her cry in his shoulder. He looked in Itachi's direction to see her standing over the dead body of Fugaku, but seemed to be looking at the other direction. He didn't have time to think about it at the moment as he held Mikoto and helped soothe her as best as he could. With Hitomi. Hitomi had just killed Fugaku with her ninjato before she heard sounds coming from the other side of the room. She looked over her shoulder and inwardly cursed it was her little brother Sasuke, and with him seeing her over Fugaku's body made it confusing for the child. "Nai-san, what's going on? That clan has been killed." And that's when realization came up on his face. "Then Nai-san," he said as tears fell from his eyes. Hitomi flinched, which was missed by Sasuke, and decided on another course of action. "I was doing this to protect those precious to me, Sasuke." She said in her Itachi Jinjutsu. Sasuke looked at his Nai-san's form in confusion before he saw Hitomi's eyes close before they snapped open, revealing her Sharingan. Hitomi knew what she was doing was risky, but maybe this way she could help her little brother. Before Konoha could corrupt him. "I'm sorry Sasuke, but I have to go now. As for why I did this, it's like I said, it was because I wanted to protect those important to me, that included you as well. Good baby brother," she said, before her Sharingan morphed into a 3-pronged shuriken and said. "Manjikyu." Tsukimish said that was when Sasuke fell unconscious with a gift from his Nai-san to secretly protect him later on. With Naruto. He pulled away from her and spoke. "Mikoto-san, we have to get you out of here. I promise everything will be explained soon, but there is something rotten happening in Konoha and I intend to find out, so please do me this favor and follow Itachi when he asks you to." He said. He started walking out of the hole in the wall. Mikoto watched her best friend's son and her personal friend walk out after protecting her from getting killed. She calmed herself and saw Itachi come back in with a sad frown on his face. "Ah-san, it's time we go," but first puts his hand in a tiger seal kai. Before she changed back to her real form, shocking and making Mikoto smile happily. Hitomi smiled as she hugged her Ka-san. "Ka-san, we have to go. Naruto-kun has helped me get the innocents of the Uchiha clan away. We need to get to them and fast," said, surprising Mikoto once more before she started grinning. "Suwaits Naruto-kun now, huh?" she said. Hitomi just blushed and looked away from her as Mikoto was laughing at her daughter's expense. Naruto himself had already shunpo to the Anbu HQ and demanded for the guards to drag every single council member to the chambers on the law of the captain commander himself ordering this. They quickly saluted, not wanting to be in Naruto's line of wrath. When the council members of all kinds were summoned from all the civilians to the clan heads and elders, even Sarutobi himself were dragged by the anbu and told to come, for it was an emergency. When they asked why they only got it was Naruto commander's order, which made them all think what was going on. "Why has that brat called us here for so late in the night?" said a pink-haired councilwoman. "I agree, what is so damn important that he'd have his own anbu drag us from our home to come here?" said another civilian. The clan heads though were mentally frowning, wondering what was going to have a meeting ordered by Naruto himself, and it never happened since he hated the meetings. "It's because I have important business with some people in this very room and you're all here to witness what I mean," said Naruto as he appeared from the made everyone jump, not even sensing him there, while Sarutobi, the elders and civilians glared at him. "Why have you called this meeting, boy? Some of us have better things to do." Naruto just threw a glance at the man before ignoring him completely as he pulled out a folder from his coat. "This is the reason I've brought you all here. It would seem there was some Uchiha in the clan planning a coup," said, and raising his hand silencing the incoming questions. He then spoke once more. "Also, this folder here is a personal file on my squad member Weasel aka Itachi Uchiha, and from what I can see there is top secret information of him being a spy for the Uchiha clan," Dottie said, gaining even more gasps and narrowed eyes from Sarutobi and the elders. "But that's not the real reason I've brought you here. You see, you Sarutobi, and you honorable elders of the Shinobi Council, have made him an undercover spy to be placed as a double agent in the clan, and also have ordered for him to slaughter his clan that also has innocents within that know nothing of the plan some others were making," Dottie said. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes at Naruto, while the elders did the same, while the clan heads were inwardly trying to figure where this was going. "So I say right now, what gave you the right to order one of my subordinates? Even if you're the Hokage, you have no jurisdiction with my squad here in Sarutobi. And even more so, you threatened my subordinate with his family if he didn't do as you ordered. So I'm gonna give you one chance to explain yourself, Sarutobi. One chance is all you're gonna get," he said. The clan heads were gawking before Tsume growled at Sarutobi. She always knew something was fishy about the man, but with this recent information tipped the scales. Sarutobi was thinking a mile a minute on what to do before going with an alternative. "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, you dare order me, the Hokage of Konohagakure, and dare threaten me? Would you risk your life like this to get information?" he said. Naruto glared at the man. "Hell yes, you old bag of Ingbon," he said with venom dripping from each word. Sarutobi then smirked and decided to play his ace. "But what about Mito? Are you willing to risk her life?" he said, getting shocked looks from them all. Naruto was deathly silent after that before an unmeasurable force slammed in the chambers, crushing the floor. The civilians didn't stand a chance and was slammed into the floor. The clan heads had more resistance, but had to hold onto their desks from falling to their knees. Though Sarutobi had the worst of it since it was all aimed at him. He was on his knees gasping for breath. He looked at Naruto to see a menacing ghostly figure, holding a scythe hovering over him, as Naruto was glaring at him, with his now eyes changed from the ice-cold blue to the black eyes with the golden pupils. They held so much anger and hate it was suffocating. Naruto raised his right hand as Zangetsu appeared in his hand and pointed it at Sarutobi. "If you so much as try anything to hurt her to get to me, I will make what I did in Iwa and Kyuubi's attack look like a children's fight compared to what I would do to you and Konoha as a whole," he said with a much different voice than before. He then glared. "Now that you have spoken, I will leave you. Will this threat here is in Sarutobi. If you so much as try anything that I find out is not right in my book, I will do something far worse for your village and release all the secrets I know of in Konoha, from the defensive mechanisms that protect our walls to the Fuin barrier that surrounds Konoha, everything to even its dark little secrets," he said. This made Sarutobi go pale and nod before the pressure let up completely. When they looked up, they didn't see Naruto anywhere. But they could still hear his voice. "Always remember, Sarutobi, I'm always watching you and I'll be there when you up, and I'll be the one to send you to the Shinigami along with your teammates," Dottie said before the voice faded away. This event had marked a major shift in Konoha as the day one Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze became its #1 enemy and missing Nin. With Naruto, we find him already outside the Konoha Gates as he headed for the safe houses. As he did so, he sent 4 cage bushins henned into messenger birds to relay the information and for them not to do anything until they got another message from him again. 5 minutes later, using Shunpo, he arrived at the safe house to see the security seals activated and the occupant safe and sound inside. He could also sense Mito in there as well, with Hitomi and Makoto around her. He sighed before walking up to the doors and activating a blood seal to unlock the security seals, as to not set the alarm off. As he got inside, he locked it back and turned around to see the Uchiha survivors looking at him with understanding eyes. Mitomi must have explained while he was out. He nodded at them as he walked up the steps to talk to Hitomi and Makoto, and also to check up on Mito. When he got to the second floor, he saw a few Uchiha shinobi that weren't involved with the traitors guarding the door. Once they saw him though, they saluted before opening the door. He smiled at them before walking through as the doors closed behind him, ending with a click. Once inside he was on the receiving end of getting tackled by a red Miss Lee, knocking him back a few steps. He looked down to see Mito smiling at him, he smirked before looking out to see Hitomi in her true form and Makoto smiling at him. He smiled back and he picked up Mito and set her on his shoulder, only for her to stay put. He sighed before setting her in his arms in a bridal carry as she cuddled into his chest. Naruto rolled his eyes with a gentle smile. Mito was always clingy when it came to him. He kept walking as Mito snuggled closer into him and spoke. So I'm guessing you told the others of the situation, he said, gesturing to Hitomi. Said now revealed female Uchiha heir smiled yeah, though it was surprising when a few said they had suspected something, but couldn't get any real evidence. She said. And have you told pointing at Mito about anything else, he said. Hitomi nodded just a small portion, but what I don't get it's what we're going to do next, she said with a frown. Naruto just grinned. I have an idea, just have the survivors get ready, we're leaving in 10 minutes. Naruto said while shifting Mito so her head was resting in the crook of his neck as he walked to the window looking out in the forests of Fire Country. Hitomi nodded before walking out to address the survivors of their next move. Makoto though stayed and walked up beside him as she looked at him with a gentle smile. You know Naruto-kun, you remind me so much of your father and mother, it's remarkable, she said. Naruto smiled. Yeah, though honestly I think I take more after Tusan, but got the short anger fuse from Ka-san. Especially when it comes to council meeting, said with a frown. Makoto just laughed. True, Kushina wasn't one for politics, but could make them shut up when they needed to, and I can see you got your father's and physical appearance and skills. She said with a little humor in her voice. Naruto just grinned. Yeah, but I think Mito-chan here is just like mom and everything from the tomboyish attitude to the talent and Yuinjutsu. He said as his eyes softly settled on Mito as he pat her head, causing the little girl snuggle closer into him. Makoto blinked and smiled at the scene. Naruto-kun, you really love her, don't you, she said. Which Naruto just looked at Makoto softly. Yes, I love her more than anyone could imagine and would protect her to my dying breath just like you, Hitomi, Kyofu, and all my other precious people. That was the promise I made when I died, he said with the last part quietly, but Makoto caught it, but before she could question him, Hitomi came back in. Naruto-kun, everyone is ready, it's time to go. She said. Naruto just turned around and nodded and walked to the door with Makoto eyeing him strangely. She still couldn't get out what he said out of her mind. Now she knew there was more to Naruto than she or anyone else even knew. She then decided she would find out what he meant later on. Naruto walked out the door before he remembered something and looked at Hitomi. Hitomi-chan, where is Sasuke, he said. Hitomi just closed her eyes. I decided to leave Sasuke behind. I explained this to Ka-san and agreed. I have a plan that has a risk of a 50-50th chance in the future to work. Until then we'll have to wait till then, she said. Naruto just closed his eyes remembering Sasuke when he was growing up and decided he would keep an eye on him to make sure he was okay. He opened his eyes very well, then as you're still acting commander, I am gonna keep an eye out on Sasuke if he's ever in trouble or decides to take the wrong path. I'll straighten him out for Yao, said with a grin. This made Hitomi as well as Makoto go wide-eyed before they smiled and nodded. Arigato Naruto-kun, they both said in unison, which was pretty funny seeing they looked like clones of one another. Naruto just smiled and waved them off. It's alright, but right now we have to get moving. He said as he walked out the door with the two following him. Makoto wondering where they were going. Where will we be going, Naruto-kun, she said. Hitomi raised an eyebrow. She too wanted to know, but she was more curious at how her mother was exclaiming his name in such an affectionate manner. Naruto just kept walked as he held Mito. Where we are going is the one place I know you all will be safe, it's the one place Konoha can't touch you. We're going to the heart of Fire Country, we're going to Hai-Shai, the capital city of Hai no Kuni, Naruto said. This made them gasp. They were going to the Fire Daimyo city. The very place that was built even before Konoha. Sure, they had been around the area on missions, but never before inside the city. Naruto somehow knowing their thoughts. Don't worry, we'll be let in. I know the Fire Daimyo and Hess, a personal friend of my father's and myself as well. Even if the man is a lord of a country, he will not deny help from me, since I've helped him out before and saved his family from assassination once or twice. He said, shocking them even more. Naruto then looked at Mito before patting her head as he softly spoke. No matter how long I have to, I will always protect you through life or death. I shall stick to my promise and always protect you, Naruto said. He inwardly didn't know why he said that, but it's just something within him demanded him to say it. He shook his head as he was followed by a smiling Makoto and Hitomi. Hai-Shai gates. At the gates of Hai-Shai, we find Naruto with Makoto and Hitomi on both his sides, while Mito was on walking beside Naruto holding his hand with the last remaining Uchihas following them. When they finally reached the gates, they were surrounded by the guards. They were samurai, the personal army of any daimyo. They were the security force and police force of each capital city in every country. As everyone was tense, Naruto was just staring at them with an impassive face. That is until they heard a voice from the samurai. Then Naruto Dono said a male voice. Captain, said a samurai. The samurai were looking at their captain who was walking past them toward Naruto before he bowed, surprising them all. Naruto just smiled at the man who was wearing the standard samurai armor, except he wore a captain's badge for Squad 3. The man had messy brown hair and gray-black eyes. He wore a katana at his hip and a small dagger attached to his back with the handle facing his right, so it would be an easy quick draw. It's good to see you, Nakura, Naruto said. The newly named Nakura stood up and smiled at the man before him. As it is to me, Naruto, what have you come here for, he said, eyeing the people with him. Naruto frowned and spoke. That will have to be spoken with, Aizo-sama said, which got a frown from Nakura and nodded. Then follow me, you all back to your posts, nothing to see here, he said, making the samurai head back to their positions. Nakura then looked back and said, now if you will all follow me, we will head to see, Aizo-sama said, getting a nod from Naruto. Mito, who was watching curiously, looked up at Naruto and asked the question on all their minds. Ah no, Naruto Nai, who is Aizo, she said, with her face crunched up cutely, making her look like a confused fox. Naruto just smiled as he ruffled Mito's hair, making her pout as a tint of pink rose up on her face. Why, Hess, the fire daimyo of Hai no Kuna said in a nonchalant manner, although inwardly he was grinning like a madman. This got gaping looks from everyone as he walked on with a confused Mito as to who the fire daimyo was. Hyperesu throne room entrance. Naruto with Mito followed by Mikoto and Hitomi. They had left the remaining in another room so they could rest after the long journey. As they left them, they had followed Nakura, as Naruto had yet to say a word, only to speak when asked a question from Mito. When they reached the throne room doors, Nakura turned around and smiled. Aizo-sama, we'll be expecting you, Naruto Dono, so please go on ahead, Dottie said before the giant doors opened up slowly to reveal a room twice the size of the Hokage's office. The room itself had paintings of the previous daimyos, along with their accomplishments listed below. The head of the group was a small red carpet leading to a throne with a person sitting in it. This person was wearing elegant and formal clothing. He had black hair with some gray could be seen, showing he was middle-aged. The man had brown sharp eyes that showed wisdom and a feeling of commandance. This man was Iroh Mizaki, current fire daimyo of Hai no Kuni and Lord of Fire Country. The man smiled brightly when he saw Naruto and speaks. Welcome, Naruto, how long has it been, he said. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Thedeming King Naruto for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.